Welcome, then, everyone.
Thank you. I feel like I need to start off with an apology. I just realized driving over here, I haven't been here at all this year, and usually I come over a couple times a year. I haven't been able to make it over. I could bore you with the details, but I'll just say, sorry, whoops, I'll try to fix it. So, and I just got to tell, I love the new name change from ASU to ATD. I think it's much more representative of what we do and much easier to avoid confusion with other things. So let's talk for a minute about what this topic's really about. And again, it's for a smaller group, it'll be a little more informal. And as always, for those who we talked before, I'd like this to be a conversation, not a presentation. So even though I'm a professor in my day/night job, you don't have to raise your hand, just smoke up this, you have questions, just yell it out, let's talk. Okay? So performance strategy, what in the heck is that? Well, let's start off with what our questions are for the day. We have three. What is performance? Why do we care? And how can we manage it? And this is a really, really important question because the word performance is kind of like art in that we have different definitions. People say I know it when I see it, and we also know what it is not. You can tell when a person or a company is not performing real easily, but sometimes you can't tell when they are performing. And part of that is a definitional issue. So what first thing we want to do is we want to talk about what is performance. And one thing I will level set, if you have the now ATDs, CLPC or CPT, I believe the other certification, the definitions that we're going to talk about today does draw from those and draws from the work of folks like Thomas Gilman. Links up a little bit with some of the performance DNA type stuff, but it's those definitions are synchronized there. And when we deviate is how we talk about ways to manage them. So let's start off with what is performance. Well, it's execution or accomplishment of some task, real simple. It's also in business, it's hitting the desired goals. Now that gets a little bit stickier when we talk about business because sometimes businesses don't define their goals so well other than we want to make more money. But how do you make that more money? How do you achieve that? If you're not a profit, how do you perform there? How do you serve that constituency? If you're a government organization, how do you know if you're performing other than you're not getting sued? How do you know those things? And then finally, it is the result of investments we make in our human capital assets. Now, this human capital word is a very important one. And again, if you've ever read my blog post, if you've ever seen me speak before, you notice I usually use the word human capital, not human resources. Okay? That's a very important thing. Anybody want to guess why I do that or why it's so important? What?
I said we can all guess why you call it human capital.
Well, okay, I'll tell you then.
We'll guess it, yeah.
Well, yes.
Hey, what are we, human capital, or are we a resource that is on the wrong side of the balance sheet from our perspective?
Well, that's exactly it. And the reason why I use that term is, over the course of my career, I spent a lot of time dealing with MBA types who all the time their investment. And a resource asset is by definition consumable, and it will eventually run out. A capital asset, the more you invest in it, the more value it will have. So like this building is a capital asset. If you invest in this building, it will be worth more money tomorrow than it is today. However, if you don't invest in it, by the simple law of nature, law of physics, it will atrophy, it will fall apart, and then it will one day be worth less. So human capital we must invest in to get the value out of it that we need. And if you look at research after research and experience after experience, that human capital asset is the differentiator between successful organization and not success. In fact, I did the tour of FedEx a couple months ago, and they were talking about how they had to invest in the training of the franchisees, and the franchisees had to invest in the training of their people, because otherwise, if you go out there and you're messing with all those chemicals, it's going to go real bad. And so you have to invest in make sure you're doing the right things. Otherwise, you don't get the value you want. Now, what is performance? We can break it down in terms of behaviors and outcomes. And behaviors, some examples here. We're not going to go into too much depth. Just, behaviors, building a microwave oven. The outcome, complete microwave. The selling a cell phone. Well, what's the behavior? That's the selling. But the outcome is a signed cell phone order, a signed contract. And if you look through these, you'll notice that the outcomes have to be tangible, something you can grasp onto. One of the things that we talk about in the training world is, some people say, well, what's the tangible outcome of this training? What are you getting out of it? What's the tangible outcome of this human resource development activity? What are you getting out of it? And if we can't translate that and we can't translate that into something useful, that's when we get in trouble, and that's what we're talking about today. So, a little more.
When you can identify it, if you can't quantify it, like in the world of sales, more sales, that can be a lot of different, the number of sales that increase, but the
Right.
profit line it's not as valuable.
Right.
And I think in some cases, don't you have to quantify it as well as?
Well, there's, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Ideally, you can quantify it to a dollar figure. However, there are times where we will take it back and quantify it to some other outcome, but we need to be able to clearly link that outcome to a dollar figure,
Okay.
if in the for-profit space. And one of the things that we often don't do is we don't think through, okay, you know, I'm saying I'm going to do this training is going to get people to do X. Well, it may not be immediately clear how that links back to a profitable outcome. So we have to really think about making that case, because again, if we can't make that case, then what's the point of it? You know, there's an example of, you know, in the government space, they'll say, you know, well, we have to do this training, what's the point of it? What does probably matter? Well, it doesn't matter, but are you serving a constituency? Or things like compliance training. Sometimes you're doing it not so much to make a profit, but because you don't want to get sued or fined because you'll lose money. So you've always got to tie it back.
Protect your end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my sister works for the So Falcon Jet, which makes their jets, custom jets, and they go through training after training after training mandated by the FAA. Some of it is just stuff they do not get fined by the FAA. And they say, okay, what does it cost to get fined? What does it cost to do the training? Well, it costs a lot less to do the training. So, it makes sense. So, when we talk about the behaviors, we break behaviors into two key pieces: mental processes and observable actions. Behavior, that's all there is to it. People get all, you know, again, I'm a psychologist by training. I'm also an industrial organization psychologist by training. You know, I get, you know, you get all this call from things of, you know, different motivations, blah, 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 all this stuff. Comes down to two things. What do we think? Oops, I hit the wrong button there. What are we thinking? What are we doing? You know, the think is deciding which tool to use. The behavior, assembling a product. Interpreting alarms, setting controls. You know, it's real simple stuff. And when we're thinking about developing a performance strategy, we have to, you know, we'll get to the point where we say, these are the things we're going to train on. These things need to tie back to something in the business. Okay? So what's an outcome? Outcome is something of value to the organization. And again, value can be for a commercial enterprise, more sales, or an NGO, non-governmental organization, some kind of service to a constituency. You know, I've done some work with a shelter there in Little Rock where I live, and basically we have to help train them on how to take care of the intake, the families who are now homeless or in bad situations, to take them and take care of them properly. Because there's not a profit motive there, but you want to bring them in properly, take care of them, and also you want to do it in an efficient way, because if you're a non-governmental organization or a charitable organization, you've got finite dollars to spend. So you have to spend that money the most effective and efficient way. Again, some examples here, I'm not going to go through those. I'm going to send a PDF of these slides over to Leonard, and he'll be sure to share it with everybody once we're done. And again, the important part is every organizational entity, you can break this, is a little bit further there. There we go. Okay. There we go. Every organizational entity, you can break their outcomes, the value down into 5 to 7 outcomes. Okay, 5 to 7. It's interesting. There's a guy who wrote Performance DNA, and he always argued. He said it's 7 to 9. I say it's 5 to 7. You know, the point is it's a finite number. Okay, and the reason why I do that is if you take, and when I say entity here, let's define entity. So if you look at an organization, right, that's one entity. If you look at their goals from a strategic plan, you can break down that value point into 5 to 7 outcomes they want to achieve. Okay, that's the organization. Now the organization, when you break the organization down into, say, divisions, be they HR, be they finance, be they sales, there's usually 5 to 7 outcomes in each one of those that drives that value. Now here's the little trick, and we'll talk about this when we do the case study at the end. The 5 to 7 things of each entity, for the lower levels, need to roll up to the 5 to 7 outcomes of the strategy of the bigger organization. Who here has ever seen a situation where that doesn't happen? How well does that one go? Yeah. So one of the important things we do in developing a performance strategy is kind of that cascading, either cascading down or cascading up. Now that's one of the advantages of the performance strategy approach is that we can start at any level, because a lot of these different things will either start just at the bottom level and say, well, let's look at the employee level, or let's start at the corporate level. But they don't kind of get in that middle part. And so one of the things that we do, I've had some times with clients where we'll come in and we'll start off like, we'll talk about the example, we started off at a subdivisional level. And so they realize, oh, this is neat, and then we can go up or we can go down. It's very, very, very flexible that way, and not a lot of methodologies do that, so.
Yeah, one of the things we've done at Hilton over the last several years is to make sure each year our objectives are aligned. And so we actually do have the waterfall or the trickle down now, where
Yeah.
it takes a couple, 2-3 months now. We're still working on the process after about 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
for us to get our expectations, because they set their corporate expectations first, and then based on HR, how does that impact training? Based on training, how does that impact me as an individual? And so it should, in theory, roll all the way up to what the CEO has as his expectations.
Yeah, that is the goal. And interestingly, there are times where, there are some, if you ever read my strategy book, there's 2 ways to strategy, the top-down or bottom-up approach. And there are some organizations that will actually build their corporate strategy based upon the capabilities from their core functional customer-facing units. And so it's really it's a business decision. There's different ways to do it. There's dozens of different ways to skin the cat. But, you got to find ways to go either direction. Or if you get locked in one of the others, you're not going to do it. Any questions on that? Thoughts? That's a great example. Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's look at example of an outcome. Let's take an airline pilot, okay? Airline pilot. Just again, for full disclosure, I used to fly like 50 to 100,000 miles a year. I was working like a century in Booz Allen. My lovely spouse, when we first started dating, she was like, "You're gone every week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gone every week." But now you have 2 kids, so I don't do it anymore. But I was always very, very cognizant of what's the value of an airline pilot. Well, the valuable outcome is passengers safely at destination get off the plane. It's not like all this other stuff. It is, you're the pilot, your goal is to get people on that plane and where they're going safely. Keyword there. How's that done? Well, successfully flying the plane. What goes into that? Whole bunch of stuff. Flight plan, performance checks, performance checklist, blah, blah, all this different stuff goes in there. And what happens? When we combine the task, it's called a process. That process term is key to our performance strategy. Very important. And when we look at process, for these 4 tasks, that's called the process for preparing takeoff. Within flying the plane, there's multiple processes. And so what we do is we always look at what are the different processes, and we'll talk a little bit about how processes are often, there's a formal version, and there's what really goes on. And a big part of what we have to do is take what really goes on and integrate the good parts and eliminate the bad parts. That's basic stuff there. So how do we do that? Well, we have knowledge. We have knowledge to do that. We have skills. So those are how we apply those skills. Abilities. Basic stuff. The KSAs. Every job description, I'm afraid that should be in every job description. I've had some clients where I walk in, they have 40-year-old job descriptions. There are 2 lines that says, cleans building, other duties aside.
Yeah, always got that.
Yeah, I wish that. I had a client about 2 years ago, out of state New York. I walk in there and look at their job descriptions, and we talk so much about it in there, and it literally says, cleans building, other duties aside. What does that tell us? Well, what else do we need? Well, we need a few other things too. We need attitude or aptitude. Aptitude is the ability to learn new things. The workforce is constantly changing. We have to integrate that. What else do we need? Attitude. What is the biggest predictor of performance in most organizations from an individual level? It's the attitude. I would take someone with a great attitude and a little less skill and a little less knowledge over somebody who has all the talent in the world and a bad attitude at the end of the week. Anybody here watch college football? Yeah, I was going to say, this is Tennessee. if the hands up, that's why I love your presentation. I get those presentations up north, and I get these looks like, what? What about the pros? But the point is, how many times we see people with great talent, and they have some bad attitude and just wash out? And of course, the last one is experience. You got to have all 6 of these things. And when you're developing a performance strategy is to take all 6 of these into account, or you're not going to get the outcome you want. So, does that make sense? So that's what performance is, basically. So why do we care? Well, we all know this, because performance drives our business outcomes. And what are some examples of why we know that? Well, there's a great quote from Andrew Carnegie where he said, if you take away my people and leave my factories, in a few years, grass will grow in my factories. And he also said, if you take my factories and leave my people, in a few years, I have a bigger and better factory. I'm not reading that verbatim, but you get the idea. And I presented one time, and somebody said, well, that was the Industrial Revolution, we had to have people, it wasn't efficiency, not the knowledge economy. And I said, well, there's a little guy named Bill Gates. Maybe you've heard of him. And he made a comment one time, he said, take away our 20 best people, and Microsoft would become a very unimportant company. Now, I would argue it's a lot more than 20 people given the size of Microsoft. But the point is, it's the people that make the difference. It's that human capital component. Okay? So, here's a neat little thing done by the conference board a few years ago. Let's talk about why people don't perform. Now, if you look at the top here, things like poor and insufficient performance feedback. We'll talk about the stress level in a second. No performance standards, lack of clear goals. You know, this low compensation about not-performance is right here at the bottom. You know, as psychologists, we learn about things like Maslow's hierarchy of need, Hertzberg's hygiene theory. You know, compensation, a lot of companies say, well, if I throw more money in, they'll perform better. Compensation only motivates performance until you hit saturation point. Now, admittedly, saturation is different for everybody, but once you get past a certain level, compensation is not going to motivate you one bit. And if we go up here to what is causing it, stress seems to be causing lack of performance. But you know what? If we address these things like lack of feedback and clear goals, I will willing to bet you this stress goes away. So we have to always think about how we get folks to perform. Well, how we usually do it? Well, there's one approach is the just say, on your mark, get set, go perform. Now, that doesn't work. Or you hire a consultant, and again, as a consultant, I feel like I can say this, and we make pretty graphics like this and stick them on a wall in the building. Y'all know what this means? I don't either, I made it. Little secret, never worked.
So pretty.
Do what? It is just pretty. I know, it's pretty.
It's interesting that performance is not connected at all.
Well, and that was actually fun. You know, I thought this other was going to catch that. That was actually done on purpose. Because typically that's what you do. You got all this other stuff here at performance, who knows where it's at. When I was a consultant, I had a boss, and we would literally just keep making graphics. And he said, I don't care what they do, just keep making something that decides pretty, and then I'll send them a bill. And that is not a joke. So, you know, a lot of this stuff gets thrown out, but gets stuck, and it becomes shelfware. So, now the other thing we do is we throw software at it. So we say, well, let's get a talent management system there. That's a good one there. And we'll do, oh, let's do a learning management system. Let's throw that in there too. And oh, wait, we got to have a session planning. Got to know who's going to replace who. And then, of course, we have a 360 radar feedback. And then, what else we got? Oh, knowledge base. Got to have a good knowledge base. Our best folks go home at night. Just for fun, let's throw a secret shopper in there just to see what happens. We throw software to make it work. Now, I always equate, now the couple things about this. Number one is just full disclosure. I throw Reliant up here because they have a cloud-based talent management solution. And I use them for the example for two reasons. For one, they're a strategic partner of ours. And so remember, I have folks who don't have a talent management system, and they need one. I throw it out because it's fairly inexpensive, and so they're a partner. And also, the guy out there, Chris, who's on the company, a buddy of mine, we started off in grad school 20 years ago, and so I can make fun of him, and he won't come yell at me, and he does. I yell back at him. But I use this example because we do this so often, right? I mean, I was talking about the cookie example. You know, if you're a company and you make cookies, right? And you have a problem with burnt cookies. And somebody comes in and says, let's slap in a system that does it faster. Do you know what you get? What do you get? Faster burnt cookies. And this is what we do all the time with performance. We say, well, people aren't performing, let's go slap in, and again, not to speak ill of, you know, let's slap in this system or that system. And, you know, and it's just, either you're going to change, if you're doing SAP, you change your processes to match them, or something else, you just do it faster.
So you're saying we throw something at it so they can do their job more easily and efficiently.
No, I'm saying we throw something at it and they think it's going to work. But half the time, too, when you throw this stuff up there and you don't think about what goes into it, what people end up doing is doing double work because they have to enter stuff in the new system to get their boss off their back and spend that money on it. But the new system doesn't work the way it's supposed to, so they'll go and they'll do this Excel spreadsheet they did before. So actually what you do is you end up getting, losing money on it. So, what should we do differently? What do we do that, again, I'm a big believer in software once you have the process right. It does it faster, works real good. I've actually helped Reliant throw this in a few places and seen it work great. I've worked with other softwares, other places, and when it's worked right, software is good to accelerate. But what do we do different? Well, we have to clarify our performance strategy, which is why we're talking today. Right? This is actually, it's one of these things where It's, at the high level, it's very simple, but you get down to it's a little more complicated. So let's first talk about what is a strategy. And this definition comes from the book. I use this definition because it's the book that I wrote, and, well, like all people, I'm like what I write. Otherwise I wouldn't put it on paper. A strategy is a plan that creates a sustainable competitive advantage for the organization, even in the face of a changing environment. Okay? That's really important for people because what your folks do today is not what they will be doing tomorrow. Okay? Anybody that says they do that is crazy. They need to go see a clinical psychologist because they're not quite there. Or they're delusional or something. But what they do today is not going to be able to do tomorrow. So how do we usually try to approach, so what's the normal performance strategy for most organizations? Well, let's start off with talking about how we define performance or how we measure it. Most things in life can be defined in terms of outcome. Height, car speed, wingspan, strength, whatever, all outcomes just in nature, infinite number of times you have some kind of outcome. And over here, you got your high performers, down here is low performers, this is your average, this is what most folks are doing. Not all folks, okay? So how do most companies try to address a performance issue? Well, they throw some training down here on the bottom end at these low performers. They buy something off the shelf, stick the low performers in a room, and hope that it gets some traction. Now, again, bear in mind, open kimono, there's just some, I'm not against off-the-shelf training. I'm not against putting low performers into training. My company, we have 19 little set courses that we do. They're, neat little courses, but if this is all you're doing, you're going to be lucky if you get a 2 to 3% lift off of that. Most of the time, you're going to end up losing money on it because it's a sunk cost. Again, it's a resource investment, not a capital investment. But that's what folks do. So what do we do instead? Well, what we do is we don't worry about that. As we say, you know what? We know there's top performers. And those top performers, let's look at what they do and how that integrates with the corporate goals. And then what we'll do is we'll use what they're doing to move this entire bell curve to the right. Because you're always going to have some folks who do better than others. You always have other folks who do worse than others. But our goal is to get the entire group moved, not just, play around back here, because kind of want to fire those folks, not fire them, but counsel out those folks anyway, whatever the proper term is this week. Because, maybe they're yeah, it changes.
It does.
Yeah. I
A
mean,
lot of
maybe,
times you're spending more money on these low performers
that's,
than you are on these higher performers who are actually generating revenue or pushing
Yeah.
dollars.
the Pareto Principle that 20% of your workforce generates 80% of your value is very, very true. And where do we put the investment? We put it down here where we don't get a return for it. We should be putting it, in this area. Actually, where you really should invest is this middle part, because they're the ones that have the ability to grow. These top performers, they're going to figure out anyway, and most of those top performers are basically narcissists and high performers. So when they see all the middle performers doing better, they're going to figure out ways to do more anyway, so just don't worry about it. They're going to figure it out. It's these folks right here that we work with. It's those folks we try to improve. And this is how we do it. So, performance strategy. You have to have chevrons, because we're all training department here. You have chevrons and things that point. There's 4 big steps. We'll get to in detail. One is define the business objectives, trying to have a strategy, or creating a strategy if you lack a written down one. You'd be surprised many companies don't have a strategy. Document the current processes. We'll talk a little bit about how we document that. And we use a very simple model that we call SIPOC. I didn't invent it. I basically appropriated it from several other consulting firms over the years. Collect data from top performers, then develop the strategy to get to the outcomes we want. So first step, define the business objectives. Again, 5 to 7 critical outcomes that matter at each business entity level. And again, also we start off, in a divisional level, at a departmental level, at the corporate level, whatever level we start off at, we've got to do those 5 to 7 criticals. Things like if you've got folks who are working in, we'll talk a little bit about a Center for Learning, going and fixing coffee in the middle of the day, there's a cost for that, but it's not going to matter to your outcomes. How you enter your time for the day, that's not a business outcome. How you, let's say, document training needs so that you can get to the needs of that department that you're forced to develop, that's a critical outcome. If you're in a sales role, how you enter all the information into your CRM system, that's important, but it's not critical. How you prospect, how you find new leads, how you close, those are critical outcomes. And as a business, you've got to get those defined. So how do we define the business objectives and strategy? Well, we can go look at, Porter's 5 forces, we can go look at the competency-based strategy. This is the one that I use, systems thinking strategy. Doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter which form you use, so long as the business has those clearly defined. And again, if a business doesn't have it, I will happily take them through a systems thinking strategy approach. But most of the time, the bigger corporations already have it defined somewhere. And we just simply work with what they start, what they have. Because we're not here to reinvent the wheel. We're not here to say, hey, here's your new strategy. Not say you should go to, start selling, cheesecake in Latin America or something. What we're here to say is, this is what you define, let's move forward and get those clearly defined. So we then begin documenting the processes, okay? So we actually use a thing called SIPOC, which SIPOC stands for Systems, Inputs, Processes, Outputs, and Customers. And really, it's a simple flow chart where you go through and you say, what are, so we have, we'll do a little flow chart. And, this is actually done in Microsoft PowerPoint. You don't have to use Visio or anything else fancy. I actually have folks, I teach like a luncheon on how to do flow charting. And literally, I give everybody a piece of paper, or a little piece of paper they write some data on, and a $2 plastic stencil from Office Depot, which are hard to find these days, if I ever use them, where you can draw the box for a step and the down for a decision and the outputs, because it's the thought that goes into it, Matt. I don't know what software is. And most of what we do in this, you're not looking for those big, detailed processes like you use for manufacturing. It's that human process, which is usually up a level. So what we do is we draw it out, and then we'll say what are the sources, what are the outputs, what's the process description, what happens, what comes out of it. Very simple. And for each process that's critical, we do this. Now, here's a really neat trick that we use a little differently. Sometimes, most organizations do this by sticking a bunch of folks in a room and having them talk about it to see how it's supposed to go. And they come to a formalized decision. While we do go ahead and document the official process, we also have all of the top performers. And sometimes, depending on the size of the organization, we have everybody do it if it's a small organization. Document how they do it. Anybody want to guess why?
It's working.
What?
It's working.
It's working. I know, exactly. Here's the thing I remember. This is an axiom of human behavior, especially in corporate America. Every decision everybody made seemed like a good idea at the time, no matter how silly it seems now. However, it may not be a good decision now. So we'll go through, we'll document these, and when we get to the case study, I'll tell you how this kind of worked out. We'll document all these, and we'll discover sometimes, people are doing things differently. Because what we want to do is, we want to get the top folks to pull the others up. I love this graphic, by the way, in case you can't tell. Who are this for? And how do we do that? We collect that data from the top performers, talk about their observable their outcomes, their behaviors, their tasks they're doing, and move all that forward. Because a lot of times, we have situations where, what they're doing is different than what they're supposed to be doing. You know what the number one common denominator is of top performers in organizations? Can I guess?
We don't sleep.
We all physiologically have to sleep sometime. But that's interesting though, because it actually does go to the real reason. Most top performers are in some way, depending on whether you want to say it nicely, they're either finding ways around inefficient processes, or either they're cheating. We are looking at they're finding new ways to do things, which this actually is an important point. The first step we have to do when we get the top performers part is figure out who the top performers are. Now, how do you think we do that? It's always a fun conversation. Really fun when we do this for real, because sometimes the bosses get mad about this.
You
just go to the department and ask.
if it's a salesperson, you can see by their numbers who's a top performer. But if it's in an HR department or...
Well, here's the thing. Sometimes your top sales guy is not, or salesperson, let's be simple. Sometimes your top salesperson is not the one you want to be asking how to do a process.
Oh, yeah.
So what we do is...
No paperwork.
Yeah, don't do any paperwork. And again, so what we do is we do a call triangulation, which is where we start off with looking at, again, the numbers and hard metrics. We then look at supervisory ratings, and then we also look at peer or subordinate ratings. And basically, if you throw all those out on a table real quick, you can figure out who's in the top ones of those. Usually, like in sales, it's usually not your top person, but it is somebody in the second or third of the top ones you want to talk to. Because the top person, and there are exceptions to this rule, the top salesperson in a lot of organizations are usually ticking off everybody, and the people will say, I would fire them if I could, but they're bringing too much money. You know, I have a buddy of mine that works at a large company. We've worked together for years and still together. And literally every time we've worked together, everyone has predicted that he was going to get fired at some point because it makes everybody mad. But he stays because he keeps the bosses happy and he does a bunch of sales. Now, I hang out with them, we're buddies, and I know how to put up with them. But, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you would not want that person to be given this input because, you know, you don't want to burn the bridges. You know, it's a little joke about, I need, if somebody goes through a brick wall, I'll call them, I say, I wonder how big the hole's going to be. Those are not the folks you want for this conversation. You want the folks who will say, okay, I'm going to make it fast, but I'm not going to destroy anything in the process. So when you do that, what's wrong? When we do that, we try to get the top performers, and the other thing is we ask them confidentially how this stuff is going to work, or how they want it right. A lot of times, the top performers are doing stuff they don't want their bosses to know about because it will cause them an administrative headache and get them in trouble. Now, some will say, what about the top performer who doesn't want to do it because they don't want anybody to take their thunder? Frankly, you don't want those folks in your organization anyway because they're not contributory, they're not your organization citizens, and sooner or later they're going to go somewhere else. So you want those folks in there. Does that make sense? So the last thing we do is develop a performance strategy. Well, what does that mean? We clearly define what we want, how we want to develop our employees in terms of knowledge, skills, ability, what else? Attitude, and knowledge. It's real simple. That's what we get into. And how do we do that? Well, we use that data into our human capital plans. Now, when we get beyond this, that's where it gets sticky because it gets very organizationally specific. Because every organization runs differently, but we include several things in that. Sourcing and recruitment. Where do we go find the right folks? You know, I can't tell you how many times I had a conversation today with a buddy of mine who he made this woman. He has a sales force all over the country. He's griping because he's like, I have to fire somebody once a week. I have a turnover problem. And I looked at him and I said, do you have a turnover problem? Or do you have a recruitment problem? And he gave me this blank look, because he's a pure sales guy. He's just, you know, out there cold calling. I mean, he got his job because he's a top sales guy. Which, you know, no offense, but a lot of top salespeople don't make good people managers.
That's the worst idea.
Yeah, that is the worst idea that gets done.
It can work.
It's the worst idea that gets done a lot. But he's looking at me like, what do you mean? Because if you hire the wrong folks, they're not going to do it right. I said, you may have a recruitment problem, you may have a training problem, you have a bunch of other problems, but you know, turnover is an output, not an input. It's not the behavior that drives it.
Hire slow, fire fast.
Hires, yeah, exactly. We also have selection.
Whatever the new word is.
Yeah, exactly. How do you pick the right folks? You know, in industrialization psychology, we talk a lot about how, you know, the most common selection process is an interview. People don't like to use things like assessments. But you know what? Assessments are significantly more predictive of performance than interviews. Why do they use interviews? Well, number one, they're easy and they cost less in the short term. You know, spend a couple $100 on an assessment battery to pick out somebody who's going to give you a show down the road. That costs a lot less than hiring them for 2 years while they run your customers off. But it costs less up. It costs more up front, and also there's some fair legalities there, which those we work through. But people often select in the wrong ways. They pick people that they think would be fun to hang out with. I want to go party with this person. I want to, they like the same football team I do or something. You know, they hire on the wrong reasons. They hire for the right reasons. What else do we have? Training and development. So we're all here. How often do we take folks and go back that whole, well, okay, we hired you, again, I use a salesperson example. Well, here's your territory, here's your car, go call folks. Oh, here's maybe a product manual, if that. Happens all the time. Well, I don't work too well. We have to have the right training, the right development, and training and development should be ongoing. It's not, a one-time thing. I was talking to Linda earlier about in change management, our journey management book. We talk about how there is no end to change in organizations. There should be no end to development. If your organization says, well, we're done with the development of this person, there's something not quite right about your organization. And you may be the outlier that performs, but I'll be happy for you, but it's fine if I have. Coaching and mentoring. This is a really, really important one. In addition to the formalized training and development, people need coaching and mentoring because let's face it, we all behave differently. And once you get past, we're not in the industrial revolution, production economy, where you can bring somebody in and say, you stick this peg in this hole, let it go down the thing anymore. We're in a knowledge-based and a service-based and a customer-based economy where people deal with different things. And there's cognitive thought involved in how we behave in the workplace. Now, people don't always use the right cognitive thought, but whatever they do seemed like a good idea at the time. So we have to help develop them to make sure they're having the right ideas. Otherwise, you're going to have more problems. So ongoing development. Retainment. Anybody want to know why I use the word retainment as opposed to turnover?
Because retainment means keeping them on board.
It means keeping the right ones.
The right ones on
The
board.
right ones, letting the wrong ones go. I mean, when I was at Accenture, they had this funny rule there where basically every year the bottom 10% got cut. And it was very cutthroat. And then when I was at Booz Allen, it was even worse. And while it's a very, if we take an egalitarian view of the world, that seems very harsh. The fact is, if you're a high performance organization, that kind of makes sense. Because it's like, if you have a tree, you prune the leaves. Now, if you're one of the 10% getting cut, it stinks. But from an organizational standpoint, if you're taking an approach where you say, you know what, maybe this isn't the right place for you, and you help them, or you say, you know what, we'll give you the skills, maybe you don't belong in, sales, maybe you belong in, I don't know, customer service, maybe you belong in, something else. Help them find the right place to be, as opposed to, but not staying in the wrong roles. And the last one is knowledge management. We're in this economy where our best resources are all up here. And they walk out the door in the middle of the night, and if they don't come back, I always tell folks, you need to be ready for people in your organization. Somebody's going to win a lottery, or get it by aliens, or just haven't had enough, or there's sniffing others won the lottery or something, and they're just not going to come back one day. And are you ready to manage that? I was telling a story the other day. When I was working for one of my former employers, we had a person who I still don't know if he won the lottery or what, but this person did a very colorful text message to a massive group of folks with an interesting picture and just the words "I quit" at the bottom of it. And that was the last we ever saw him. Didn't come back the next day. And there was a bunch of stuff that was needed. So how do you manage that? So any questions on this? All stuff familiar? Okay. So then, of course, you can throw the software in, so there's cool language. So let's have a little case study. Did this a while back at a hospital. It was another state, not Tennessee, a couple states over from here. Big healthcare system in a major metropolitan area. There was a Center for Learning. The chief learning officer and I worked on some stuff. And when he took over this group about 5 years before, it had been about 10 or 20 people. He had grown it to about 4 or 5 times the size in a short period of time. So really, because again, there were about 12 hospitals in the system. I don't even know how many clinics. So it was a big, big group. Okay? And what they did is they had grown, but they'd grown so fast that, big shocker, they started missing some targets, and they see whether they could do better. So always when we grow as organizations, we change. What worked yesterday is not going to work today. What works today probably going to work tomorrow. Think about that. So we went through and we clarified the strategic mission of that Center for Learning. Big surprise, we're going through, the system has its strategic objectives, the Center for Learning has its strategic objectives. We identified that only about 60% of the strategic objectives of the Center for Learning lined up to the organization. So what we do, threw all the other ones out, so we're not going to worry about those. And that actually caused some heartburn because some of those were things that had been thrown in because people had some real serious emotional investment in some of those objectives. But if it doesn't line up to the needs, why do it? What's the point? We then went through and we side-popped all the critical processes. And this group was small enough that we actually went through for each section and had everybody kind of do them. And we found that number one, the formal processes that had originally been put in place were no longer valid. Number two, everybody's doing it differently. And number three, which is really useful, a lot of the folks who were doing it well had developed tools and templates that were not being used throughout the organization. So we took those and we took all that and we gathered from top performers and we basically enabled the entire team to start using those standardized processes and these standardized templates and making them better. Now, for better or worse, they became a victim of their own success. Here's how. they turned around and actually became even more appreciated. And prior to this group had been in a little small building off the side from the main corporate headquarters. They got started being liked so much, they got moved from that up to the top floor with all the big execs, and they're like, I hate it now, I can't hide. But the point is, they turned it around up to where they really, the chief warrant officer there was actually a little more forward thinking. He knew that if he didn't change it, it would go bad. It hadn't really gone bad yet, but it started going better so much so that they started just, doing so much better that the corporate was like, well, you should be more integrated with us because you had that much value. So, any questions on that? Thoughts? And of course, there's all my info in order to find the other questions. So, what else would you guys like to know?